we gonna do?
Grim. That's how it looks.
I'll take Grim right now.
I am the Grim Reaper.
Bit grim.
Your bosses are good.
And make it grim.
A grim tale indeed.
It's a little grim.
Meaningless and grim.
It's the Grim.
It's Grim.
Pretty grim, huh?
Things look grim.
Hello, anyone who is watching. So, in reaction to the recent events, I made a little commentary video after having given it overnight to think about, and this has upset a lot of people. I listened back to the video, and it still seems as reasonable and measured and calm as I thought it was when I made it. Anyone thinking they can just simply browbeat me into thinking differently is going to have a hard time, or thinking that an outpouring of negative comments is going to change my mind. They're going to have a bad time as well. Just check my many years old at this point Kalergi Plan videos. That has seen nothing but an outpouring of horrendous comments from the far right there. And has it changed my mind? Not one jot or tittle. Also, I've been through all of this before, back in 2014, where it was the left trying to cancel me for my viewpoints on censorship at that point. And many of these people that are now shrieking and up in arms and engaging in cancel culture of one form or another are people who have railed against it in other instances, or are people who just see a chance for a grift, I think, unfortunately. But that's the media landscape we live in. That's the world we live in. What are you going to do? Now, given what happened to me 10 years ago, Mrs. Grimm doesn't want me to spend a great deal of time further engaging on all this. And I understand where she's coming from, but I did promise that I'd give people the opportunity to say things to my face. So here I am. Leave a comment or something. Tell me what I did wrong. And otherwise, we'll fill the space with blathering about what I'm thinking and so on. Now, all of my channels are primarily gaming channels. I will just blather while I wait. But I do have a very long-term interest in politics. My educational background is in politics and history and communications. So if you think I'm not going to occasionally comment on politics, then you're sadly mistaken. But I do separate out my content in various ways. I have different playlists on different topics. So if you don't want to engage with my political content, you're welcome to ignore it. Hi, Daniel. So yeah, you're welcome to ignore it. But I've never exactly been shy of what my viewpoints are, and people have always been happy enough to entertain my viewpoints and consider me well, so long as I was agreeing with them. And there's the rub, isn't it? So what is the difference then between the kinds of people that have made my life miserable since 2014 and now their opposite number? If they're doing exactly the same things, just with slightly different rhetoric, what lesson am I supposed to draw from this? If you agree that I have been reasonable, one of the good ones, and all that, all this time, and then the moment we have a disagreement about something, you blow up like an old church lady, what am I supposed to take from this? because I don't think I'm wrong. Now, back in 2016, just a sec. Hi, just a passerby. Well, everyone dies eventually. My health is unlikely to improve, but I appreciate the sentiment. So back in 2016, when I suffered another round of cancellation, there have been many. That was because I didn't agree that Trump was Hitler or fascist, and I said so. I said he was terrible. I said he was awful. That he was shit, and indeed he did turn out to be all of those things. But I didn't agree that he was Hitler or a fascist. And as things turned out, he largely wasn't, except at the end. And, there were a few problems there with trying to overturn democracy and all the rest of it. So, I got in trouble for not agreeing about that. And a lot of the people I've just recently lost as fans agreed with me on that. I thought I was being brave and upright and standing up and telling truth to power and all that bollocks. Now, though, I don't feel the same way. We've seen how petty and vindictive Trump is, and we've seen the things that he tried to do and that the people around him tried to do. And previously in 2016, that was hemmed in and controlled because there were a few adults in the room who were around, people who were loyal to the Constitution or the country or the rule of law, all of those inconvenient things, or at least they were up to a point, right? That's not going to be the case this time around, even without the Project 2025 worries, even without the Agenda 47 worries. This time around, it's going to be Trump loyalists and people who put Trump first because that's who he likes to have around him. So I think this time around, there is a genuine threat to American democracy and the rights and freedoms of many of the people living in America. Unfortunately, this situation is going to be exacerbated by the very kinds of people that normally rant about freedom and all the rest of it. They're going to be enablers this time around. And that's probably the worst part about it, I think, is, I took some people to heart when they said they cared about these things, but it's clear they don't. It's just tribalism. That's unfortunate. So yeah, this time around, Trump is likely to be unrestrained and untrammeled, not least of all because of the new powers that the Supreme Court has essentially granted the office of the presidency. And it's telling also that people aren't protesting that because Trump's not the president at the moment. So technically, Biden has all of these extended powers and the ability to be a virtual dictator, so long as what he's doing is an official act. And if that had been the case with someone like Obama, and he'd pushed for it, and the courts had sided with him, I don't doubt that people would be up in arms about it. But because it's been done to protect Trump, and because I think people know they can trust Biden not to abuse that power, people seem to have let it slide. Right? That's hypocritical, and that's worrisome. And this is just another plank of why I'm worried and why I think there is a genuine threat of American fascism, which is not the same thing as Nazism. Fascism takes many forms. There was Franco, there was Mussolini, there was Hitler, there was the British Union of Fascists, there was an American Fascist Society. Back when it wasn't such a fringe thing, there have been authoritarians and fascists everywhere, even in democracies. Even currently, you can look at like Viktor Orban and others of his same ilk, and you can see this is a problem even within democracies. I mean, look at Putin. Russia is ostensibly a democracy, but is it really? No, probably not. So this time around, I don't think it is hyperbole to worry about American fascism, in whatever form it happens to take. Certainly a form of American authoritarianism and a very dark time in which many people's rights and freedoms are abrogated and people are persecuted for being immigrants, LGBT, whatever else. And call me a commie, pinko, liberal, or whatever, but I don't think the fact that some trans activists are really, really annoying justifies dismantling American democracy or plunging the rest of the world into uncertainty. That's something I think people don't appreciate about America, is that America has a huge influence all around the world. And Trump doesn't like NATO very much, and yet an awful lot of world security depends upon NATO. So he's worrisome to the rest of the world because of that, because he appeases and cozies up to dictators like Putin, like North Korea. You know, this is a problem. This is worrisome to the rest of the world. We have a vested interest in American democracy continuing to be sane and level-headed, which it is extremely unlikely to be under Trump. So I'm worried for you, my American friends, and I'm worried for other people all around the world whose security and prosperity will be threatened by another Trump presidency. And I think there's a genuine risk this time, because there aren't those structures in place anymore, or they have been so eroded and corrupted as to no longer be fit for purpose to restrain him, to limit what he tries to do. I hope I'm wrong, but this time around, I think the threat is at least plausible. As I say, you know, my background is in politics and history and communications. So if anything, I'm more qualified to talk on these things than I am on games in many ways, if we take qualified somewhat literally. Interactions, that's what I'm here for, rather than just talking at you. Green Knight says, I think the situation is still developing and knee-jerk reactions after the outrage yesterday are premature. So, yeah, that's why I waited 24 hours or so before I said anything. I think people's reactions to what was a very calm and measured video on my part were an overreaction. But just that photograph could win someone an election, right? And what I was really reacting to was the messianic fervor with which Trump supporters, even more center-right ones, are now acting. It's not politics, it's a cult for a lot of people. Not all of them by any means. I mean, it was already that beforehand. And I mean, you can go back to George Bush Jr., right? Everyone remembers Jesus Camp. It's worse now, quite frankly. A lot of these mega churches and mega pastors, some of them even hold Trump up to be a messiah of sorts. And that's not exaggerating. And that attitude has seeped further. Now, this isn't to say that people on the left aren't also lunatics around this. Of course they are. There are stupid conspiracy theories going around that this was staged or whatever to help win him the election. I don't think it needs to be. Stupid people do stupid things for stupid reasons, and shit happens. There doesn't need to be some grand scheme around things. You know, incompetence covers most bases. But it's that fervor and the fact that it's now, I think, a slam dunk. He was probably already going to win because Biden is so enfeebled. So he's probably already going to win. But now I think he'll probably win up and down the ticket. So he'll have the presidency, both houses, and has already corrupted the Supreme Court and is likely to appoint yet more Supreme Court justices during a second term. And so that is completely unrestrained power. That's worrying. Someone else said something. Rude Knight again. I'm even more concerned at professionals dividing up along those political lines in a reactionary way. I don't quite know what you mean by professionals there. If you care to explain, I can comment. Trapdoor Spider says, at least the outrage farmers are eating well. The God Emperor Trump memes are coming thick and fast. Yeah, and I think that's what I'm a victim of, really, here, is outrage farming. But, I get uneasy when I'm popular anyway. So maybe they're doing me a favor, culling themselves from my herd. I don't know. I was hoping more people. Well, there's quite a few people watching, but there's not many people actually saying anything. But then I don't know that I get to see the comments from X or not on this feed. So if you are on X, it's probably better to hop on over to Grim Streams on YouTube and drop your comments there so I can see them. Yeah, so what I basically said in the video that's got people upset is that, this is bad, but we should try to understand how and why someone gets to that point where they try something like that. And we should think about the implications, including the implications of an unrestrained Trump presidency. And the reaction is completely out of line with that, even though I predicted the reaction in the video and got it pretty right, And it's just disappointing. I'm coping with it a lot better than I did in 2014. I don't know why. Maybe it's the drugs. I don't know. But there is still this sense of betrayal. But it's not quite as deep a sense of betrayal as I had in 2014. I think it's because most of the time I haven't expected better of the right in politics. This is them confirming my biases, which is worrying in its own way, rather than catching me completely by surprise, if that makes any sense. Don't know that it does. Rune Knight says, people that we know that were loosely aligned insofar as advocating for free speech and free games now being diametrically opposed within 24 hours, digging for justification one way or the other. Yeah, and people have been on the same side of the free speech and free games thing. Yeah, I said multiple times that I don't think political violence is justified in most cases, but I'm trying to understand where the line is, right? Sorry, it's these pills give me this cough. So I'm trying to understand where the line is, because most people, not all, but most people would say killing Hitler would be justified, right? But most people would also say killing the Prime Minister of Finland wouldn't be justified. And not just because she's hot. But somewhere in the middle there's the point at which someone's attitude switches from political violence is justified in this case to political violence is not justified in this case. So where is that point? Me being interested in that position and where people stand on it and why people are pushed to one side or the other by events or policies or whatever doesn't mean I'm condoning anything. It means I'm trying to understand something, right? So I think most people would agree killing Hitler is kosher. Most people would agree killing Stalin would have been kosher. Pol Pot, probably. Pinochet, probably. Franco in Spain, probably. So how far do you go before it's not justifiable? Now, as far as I'm aware, and people in the States may have more information, we don't know that much about the shooter yet, or what they did. Apparently they were a bit of an outcast, so they kind of fit the lone nut job variety. Who knows? It's all very muddled. I've lost my train of thought where I was going with that. Never mind. Daniel says, is Tate still the most powerful man in the world? If you're a young man between the ages of 14 and 16, he probably is. I think past that, it tails off pretty rapidly. Oh yeah, I was saying about the shooter. Yeah, we don't know what their motivation was yet, but can we understand why someone might want to do that? And I think we can understand why someone might want to do that. And again, that doesn't mean we're condoning it. It merely means that we're trying to understand and grapple with the fact and figure out why someone does something like that. And because they're crazy isn't a very good justification. And trying to broad brush the entire left because he donated to Biden, or the entire right because he was a registered Republican, doesn't get us to any kind of satisfying answer. So who is threatened? Because just being shot at doesn't mean that Trump suddenly isn't the same threat to democracy and freedom and common decency that he was before. Some people seem to think it washes him free of all his sins, but it doesn't. Is that our explanation? Has someone been overconvinced that he really would be Hitler rather than just an authoritarian asshole in the vein of McCarthy or something? Have they been convinced of that and that's why they did it? Maybe. Are they a member of the LGBT community or an immigrant? Probably not. Doesn't look like it, certainly. But, you know, those people might feel more justified. They might feel more threatened. They might feel as if their life is threatened. And in that headspace, in that context, they might feel that something like this was justified. That's possible. That's something we can try to understand and have compassion for, not empathy. Empathy is when you adopt the mindset of the person, and that can lead you into all kinds of horrible and dangerous ways. But you can have compassion, I think. Like I mentioned in the video, the guy that went into Comet Ping Pong and fired off his gun, right? In his head, he thought there were kidnapped children in the basement who were being tortured and whose blood was being harvested, right? If you thought that was happening, wouldn't you do something similar or worse? Yeah, I mean, it was nonsense. He was crazy. But if you feel even someone else is threatened to that degree, wouldn't you do something similar? And I think most people would do just about anything to prevent babies and children being tortured if it were really happening. So, you know, that shows how we can kind of try to understand and have compassion for someone who ends up in that situation. On violent rhetoric, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy going on, because I remember placards with crosshairs on Hillary during that campaign. I remember seeing ad after ad after ad by right-wing politicians with them firing off guns and promising to be tough and all that. I remember people being told to get over it, that children had been gunned down in schools. To have those same people clutch their pearls, like the pastor's wife, is it's a bit much to stomach, I think. So there's hypocrisy on all sides to go around, but of course the freshest hypocrisy at the moment is definitely coming from people on the right, I think. Which again isn't to say that there aren't disgusting people on the left saying horrible or stupid things, spewing the same kinds of conspiracy theories that Alex Jones types normally do, but not a lot you can do about it. Zero Theory says there's a lot of flirting with target imagery of political opponents. Yeah, and you know, I'm a free speech guy. I think up until the point you're actually more directly advocating violence, I think most things are okay, to be honest. There is this idea of stochastic terrorism, which is valid, but it's hard to say one person's grain of sand in the pile is responsible for the pile falling over, you know? So how do you single out anyone for that? And the opposite thing you could do would be to stop anyone saying anything negative about anyone. And that's obviously non-viable because there are valid reasons to say negative things about people or to warn about them. So that's a bit of a sticky wicket as well. I was hoping someone would be turning up who actually disagrees with me. I mean, like I was saying, I listened back to the video that I made, and it all seems perfectly calm and quiet and valid to me. So I'm not entirely sure what people are reacting so badly to be honest. Just not acting massively outraged or surprised, maybe. I guess that could be it. I don't know. It's not like anyone tells me. They just go off on one. I take it you mean hear you out. Okay, so Jack, what is it that you disagree with? Trapdoor Spider says, I can agree with you in parts, just not whole cloth. Yeah, that's fair enough. Runite says, I don't agree with you, but I disagree with other people more. Again, yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, Jack, I figured you meant hear you out. But I don't really know what I have to explain, to be honest. Like I say, it's a very calm, measured commentary on the kind of second and third order consequences of what is now likely to happen, which is very probably a clean sweep for Trump and few, if any, restraints on what he does, or more importantly, very few restraints on what the Heritage Foundation gets him to do. I think I read a study earlier today that said about in the previous administration, about 60% of what the Heritage Foundation put in front of Trump ended up being enacted or attempted to be enacted. And if you haven't read at least a summary of Project 2025, you really should. It's pretty horrible. If even 60% of that gets enacted, it'll be a unpleasant country to live in. Jack says, I do not think Trump is an existential threat to democracy. I think the threat is from the political establishment, both Dems and Reps. I don't think there's a comparison anymore, because you've got one side that actually has tried to overthrow democracy before, or at least to overthrow a vote before, and publicly and at length and proudly tells you that they want to subvert democracy. So it's difficult. KedHub says, though I've disagreed with some of your viewpoints in the past, I couldn't find any real fault with your recent video. At the very least, people should be worried about the extremist tribalism. Yeah, and I think that's what the problem here really is, because I'm not rah-rah Trump, because I acknowledge that he is dangerous to American democracy and people's freedoms and rights and everything else. That's somehow taken as a proving of the assassination attempt. I'm not really following the logic. I'm also not following the logic of people who called me centrist. I've always described myself as extremely left libertarian. I've posted pictures of my political compass where I'm right down almost all the way in the bottom left. I've never claimed to be centrist, just pragmatic. So I don't know where people were getting that from. But yeah. Rune Knight says, I think we're grievously underestimating political theatre, the act of looking like you're going to do something with no intent to do it. So the American system seems almost designed to deadlock itself, right? And so it takes something like a clean sweep before an enormous amount gets done. However, over the preceding decades, the office of the president has become more and more powerful. With this latest Supreme Court rulings, the office of the president might as well be called king in some ways. That was actually, ironically, more powerful than our king in a constitutional democracy. So what is left potentially to stop him or to stop the people around him, many of them, something like 150 at last count, from the Heritage Foundation, from implementing what they want? Who is there to stop them if he gets the clean sweep? What is there to slow? It's not even him, really. Trump doesn't have ideology. He has ego. But the people around him have ideology, and he's willing to use them to get into power and to have the trappings of power. And a lot of those people are Dominionists and Three Mountainists and other very dangerous people. So that's the worry, really. And they've learned from last time how to dangle the shiny in front of Trump to get what they want. So that's concerning. Trapdoor Spider says, yeah, but the landscape with political alignment has shifted under our feet. Yeah, but I haven't moved. Zero Theory says, unfortunately, if anything, his lack of religiosity, but that didn't help much on his Supreme Court picks. Yeah, and like I say, he's got these mega churches and so on devoted to him. And post this assassination attempt, there's so much unironic imagery of angels interceding to remove the bullet and all kinds of nonsense like that. And the religious right has gone apeshit. Absolutely apeshit. That's what worried me so much. That's what's kind of set me off. Was just watching a torrent of this stuff in my feeds. And as you can imagine, my feeds tend to be rather secular and cant a little bit left, though I try and follow people who are outside my particular political and social bubble as well. But it was terrifying. It remains terrifying. Theocracy is not anything to play around with, I don't think. Whether it's Islam or Christianity, it's always a bad show. Daniel Granger says, one of the things at Project 25 is banning porn outright, but I wonder if some would be okay with that unless it's queer. Yeah, it's one of those places where you've got this weird alliance between the Christian right and the sex-negative feminists, similar to how you have TERFs, who are radical feminists, also aligning with the right-wing dislike of trans people, and by all means, not all right-wing people. The more libertarian side tends to be a bit more live and let live. It's just a shame their economic policies will kill everyone, but it's beside the point, really. Yeah, it's one of those weird things. Now, you would think that the First Amendment would prevent the banning of pornography, as we have precedent for. But with the Supreme Court in the US, as it is now, and with potential additional picks from Trump replacing Supreme Court justices, nothing's completely off the table. Plus, other censorship worries are around the teaching of history, but teaching as a whole, books available in schools, which people have been mischaracterizing as pornography for, 2 years now? So yeah, if you're a free speech person, you should not be looking forward to another Trump presidency. Jack with $5. Thank you so much. I have to go, Mr. Grimm. Work beckons. Thanks for sharing your time and thoughts. You're welcome. And thank you for contributing. See, when the left cancelled me. No one gave me any right of reply or listen to me. So this is better. Zero Theory says historical revisionism. Yeah, so as a historian, that is, albeit amateur these days, as a historian, that really worries me. So, like, is it the 1619 project? Right, that was presenting a very, very biased view of American history and world history to an extent. But the answer to that people seem to have chosen on the right is to create their own equally biased view of American history and to teach that. My controversial position is that we should probably teach history with as much verisimilitude, as much accuracy to the truth as possible, and let people draw their own conclusions from that. But with each side wanting to pursue historical revisionism, and with each side regarding any movement slightly closer to the truth from the other side as being extreme bias the other way, it doesn't seem like a divide that can be fixed, but it's an important one, because if you don't teach history well, then we can't learn useful lessons from it. Green Knight says, the thing is, the actual power brokers in Washington are lobbyists, think tanks, and other unseen influence brokers. They'll let them say anything they like, but not unilateral implementation. To an extent, I think that's true. But occasionally politics can cut through. And remember that corporatism, the wedding of government and business and other special interest groups, such as lobbyists, that's a hallmark of fascism. So, I mean, if you want to argue that the US is already halfway to fascism, then I would agree with you. And I think the UK has been along that same path as well, to quite a degree, to be honest. Neither of our democracies are very healthy. But I don't think going to extremism is going to help solve that problem. Rune Knight says, the goal of those in power is to stay in power, not undermine their long-term power with short-term grandstanding. Well, see, that's a fatal flaw of democracies. And I'm not saying I'm against democracy before anyone clips that. Democracies tend to be short-term. Capitalism tends to be short-term. It's not very good at long-term planning. Politics, because, you only get to hold power for so long, and once you're on the way out, what do you care? And capitalism, because it all has to serve profit over all else, and they become these eusocial organisms where no one is around to actually take responsibility for what happens, and that's a problem. Night of the Night Lady says, you live in England where you need a license to watch smut. No, you don't. They've tried multiple times. So far, they have been rebuffed at every turn. So, no, we don't need a license to watch smut. And even if we did, and Project 2025 got their way, you wouldn't be able to watch smut at all, and we would be able to get a license. So in that situation, I think we'd be slightly better off. Runut says, personally, I'm worried by all the goofballs who want to go back to direct monarchy, like they can't understand what 1,000 years of political evolution looks like. Yeah, that's true. Now, there are genuine monarchists out there, believe it or not, who genuinely want to go back to a monarchy, but they are such a tiny, tiny minority of people that I honestly don't think they're worth worrying about, to be honest. But then there's the people who think a dictatorship, a de facto monarchy, is somehow a good thing, or that it would be good for Trump to be effectively a dictator for 4 years or 8 years or 16 years. But if there is an exchange of power, and it goes back to what passes for the American left, I'm sure they'd be screaming like Billy O that this was, the end of freedom and everyone must rise up or whatever. It's just such naked and obvious tribalism. It's okay if we do it. I know I shouldn't. I've said this multiple times. I know I shouldn't, but I really hate hypocrisy. because to be a hypocrite, you have to be trying to do the right thing and falling short, right? So you should feel good that someone's at least trying to do the right thing. But it really bugs me. Maybe I'm an undiagnosed autist. I don't know. Skullmaris says, don't you need a license to watch TV at all? So, yes and no. You can get away with not having a TV license if you only connect through your computer or something. I forget the exact rules around it, but I'm not actually that worried about the TV license. It's more of a TV tax that funds public broadcasting, and in the past enabled public broadcasting, BBC, some aspects of Channel 4, some other production. It enabled those things to be free of corporate influence and free of governmental influence. Now, that separation of government and media has been eroded, ironically, largely by the Conservatives over the last few decades. But the idea of the British Broadcasting Corporation, funded separately, without advertising interests and corporate interests and so on, I think that's a valuable thing, and I think that's largely been behind why the BBC has previously been regarded so well as a news organisation in the past. But it is a shame that has been so undermined in recent years. Zero 03 says, would be hilarious to find out YouTube is funding that TV license law. Yeah, if they were making money off it, maybe. I don't know. Honestly, though, I think the BBC is well worth the money, even though I don't like costume dramas. Skullmer says, I was mostly teasing, but that's a fantastic answer. Well, I'm glad to have helped you understand, and I hope you can see the value in it. Now, of course, these days, like I say, that separation between media and companies and media and government has been eroded, because every so often the government does get a say in the license fee, how much money the BBC gets, how it's organised, and so on. And over recent years, yeah, that separation's been eroded. I would love to see the current Labour government reassert the BBC's independence, but I'm not holding my breath. Power likes power. There you go. Dead and the Damned has better info. You only technically need a TV license to watch live TV. Trapdoor Spider says, last thing I liked out of the BBC was The Mighty Boosh. I never watched it at the time. It looked too cringe at the time. I probably need to go back and watch it. But for me, it's the news and the documentaries and the investigative reporting. We're losing investigative reporting and consumer advocacy from private television because there's no money in it. And we're losing it from websites as well. Proper journalism doesn't really get done anymore. And that's largely the fault of the media organizations themselves, but they're held hostage to money. So T-shirt says, God damn it, Graham, I'm trying to watch Excalibur and you've got a live cast at this exact time. The very cheek of you. I'm so sorry. Does anyone else have anything they want to ask me about my video or my views on the attempted pew-pew of DT? Internet censorship, makes fools of us all, makes us say the stupidest things. Unalived as a term really aggravates me. Bruno says, I'm a degenerate, I admit it. Blackadder, Brother Cadfael, Chef, and Red Dwarf. Oh, you watched Chef? That was the Lenny Henry thing, wasn't it? Not many people have watched that. It wasn't too popular, but I remember it quite fondly. People overlook BBC Radio as well, because because not many people listen to radio much anymore. But BBC Radio is really good as well. And the license also funds a whole load of local news that you wouldn't otherwise get, which is important, I think. Aspect of social cohesion and all that. If no one else has anything they want to challenge me on and talk about, I will toddle off in a minute. I was going to offer to do this again, but Mrs. Grimm doesn't want me to, because she thinks it's bad for my brain. Zero Theory says, "Oh yeah, the weird twisting of common terms to avoid algorithms is surreal to me." Yeah, like using the corn emoji for adult material, things like that. It's just nuts. Why should we have to do this? You know, grown-ups use these platforms as well. Just age gate part of the website or something. They're so oversensitive, and it makes it hard to be an advocate on issues like elf harm, shall we say, or ental millness, things like that. If you can't use the words, if you can't talk about the issues, I mean, that harms people because they can't. It makes it harder to get decent advice and help and assistance and a leg up when you need it. So I think these things do more harm than good, but I think that about pretty much all censorship. So pretty much, not all, nearly all. Here's one for you, Graham. What position is best in the bedroom? Laying on my side so I don't snore. Renite says, "I was today years old when I learned there was a Mrs. Grimm." Yeah, she's fairly private person in a lot of ways. So, you know, I don't go on about her a lot. But there is a Mrs. Grimm. Yeah, T-shirts talked to her a couple of times. Trapdoor says, "Have a good toddle. Take care of your beautiful brain." Yes, many folds. Skalmar says, "My gaming group recently introduced me to the term papagic. I am not sure what that means. Let's find out." Cat and papagic bodybuilding entertainment is what I have found. That tells me nothing. Not pelagic. I know what that means. Or did you typo? Let's have a look. Okay, Skull, you're going to have to tell me what that means. Internet slang to avoid the R word. Okay, well, I've got no idea. Smatumi says, "Happy wife, happy life. Do what makes Mrs. Grimm happy. Appears prefer your D&D vids, but like to Trump vid." Like I say, I separate them out. You don't have to watch my politics videos if you don't want to, and I do not insert my politics into my game material. Though I did write a "Let's Kill Trump" scenario back in 2016, but that was to make fun of people. Night of Night Lady says, "Why did you excuse Stalin's Kulak deaths as due to incompetence?" I didn't specify which deaths I was talking about. Obviously, there were many purges and other things. He had a higher overall kill rate than Uncle Adolf, but over a much longer period of time. So you could say Stalin had lower DPS than Hitler, if you wanted to be crude about it. But a lot of the stuff was down to incompetence, such as Lysenkoism and its terrible, terrible effect upon agriculture. So that's incompetence, ideological incompetence, but incompetence nonetheless. Is it distinguishable from malice? I think it is. But in no way was I excusing anything. It's just a lot of people tend to lump together Stalin's incompetence with his maliciousness. And I think it's important to separate the two somewhat intellectually. T-shirt says, so we have to discuss Treasure tomorrow. I'd almost rather talk about why Excalibur is one of the all-time best films ever made and why Borman chose to use the myths of Arthur that he did. I mean, we could do. My historical speciality is pre-Christian Britain, but there's a lot of crossover. Pelagic horror's risen and given form, indeed. That's Darkest Dungeon, isn't it? Incidentally, Percival is Welsh, isn't it? What the fuck? Trapdoor says, again, the reason I'm here, the understandable and rational separation between current politics and gaming. Yeah, I've always found it kind of ironic that many of the people who rail against politics in gaming then do their level best to put it in to their material. Vengeance Satanis, I'm looking at you. But then he does it with memes. I just think it's whatever happens to pop into Venger's head in that moment ends up in whatever he's working on. All right, I'll give you guys 5 more minutes because I was later than I'm meant to be to start. And then I'll go and do whatever. Nonchalant whistling. I don't know. We could talk about Treasure and Excalibur because you see, a lot of the Arthurian myths are tied into older myths. So, like Excalibur relates to the 7 Swords of Wayland, which relates to the Sword of the Moon and the Spear of the Sun and the Cauldron of Plenty. And that's just the all-over treasures. Wales has its own set of treasures, which includes the same things. You see the same motifs over and over again throughout pre- and early post-Christian British mythology. Here's a question. Says Rune Knight, what's the next RPG you're running and do you know when? Whatever it will be, it will not be this weekend. It will be the one after. I thought I might do a one-on-one of Chan Shang with T-shirts. So he's just learning of this now because it's very complicated. And I thought it might work best to appeal to T-shirts favorite martial arts anime and have him take on a similar role in a game. So we shall see. Dead on the Dam says, most people are only bothered by politics in media if they disagree with said politics. I think that's true of a lot of people, and I think people are also just more sensitive to different kinds of political messaging, so they are less likely to notice things that are in agreement with their own politics and more likely to notice things that are not in agreement with their own politics, which can create a false impression that they're only bothered by politics they disagree with. So yeah, it's complicated, more complicated than that, but I think you're right in a lot of cases. For my part, what bothers me about politics in media is that usually it means the media isn't very good because they're concentrating on the message, right? It's what I call the Christian rock problem, which you've probably heard me say before, because they're focused on Jesus and the message, the rock music suffers. And it goes the same for ideology in most cases. It's why Rage Against the Machine only did like one good album. Tisha says, okay, there's this trend of asking YouTubers odd questions about who they identify with. So in keeping with this, which Knight of Arthur do you most identify with? Me personally, I always felt like Gawain, but then I got old, so now I'm more like Pellinor. I feel most like Sir Bedivere from Monty Python and the Quest for Holy Grail. I'm wise in the ways of science. All right, then, last chance. If you want to hit me with anything else, on or off topic, since we've wandered way off topic anyway. You know, I half think I should just stop being reasonable. So it's like, that hasn't done me any good, has it? So, yes, Bedivere threw Excalibur back into the lake when Arthur died, which is, again, a callback to pre-Christian Britain, where offerings used to be flung into swamps, pools, and rivers, which is why occasionally we find treasure hoards in rivers and swamps and bogs and things, because water was meant to be the gateway to the other world and the afterlife, the halls of Anlin and all that. That's depressing, Rune Knight. How we were so dispossessed of our political reality, we long for the mythical politics of Camelot and the once and future king. I think we all long to be able to exert influence on the world around us. And I think that is the core fantasy that role-playing games often tap into. In RPGs, you are an agent of change. You can make a difference on a noticeable scale, while in real life, it can feel like you can't. Like you're just overwhelmed by the systems in place, or the mass consciousness, or whatever else, that you can't make a difference. And I think you can. You just have to revise your idea of scale. But I think that is the core fantasy that most escapist fiction, interactive or otherwise, tends to appeal to, which is probably far too intelligent for and weird for 4 p.m. on a Monday. Zero Theory says, are there any oddball dice you think you'd be interested in seeing a game designed around? Non D6, D10, D20. I like D12s, but I fear that Critical Role may have spoiled the D12 for people going forward into the future. But that's unfortunate. Though Advanced Hero Quest used D12s, and that was a lot of fun. Otherwise, I think other randomizers are good, like cards. Like, I feel like a deck building RPG, so long as it wasn't trying to gouge people, could be fun, could be good. Malaquin says, hey Grim, hang in there. Everything improves in time. It'll all blow over. Yeah, and I feel more sort of sanguine about this all than I did in 2014. I think I've become jaded or calloused to it. Lost about 100 subs on my main channel. But are they people who are actually clicking on things? I don't know. Do I want people around who can't stand having their ideas challenged and who can't can't articulately, there's irony for you, can't articulately challenge my ideas? Probably not. I probably don't want those people around anyway, so yeah. AJ gifted 5 Grimstreams memberships. I have no idea what that does, AJ. But I guess that's good. I don't know. Someone explain it to me. Yes, thank you, AJ. Rune Knight, D8 represent. D8s don't roll well. I don't like them. It's like 2d4s stuck together. Jack says, I'm back. Good health and long life to Grim Jim. Thank you. I would have a drink, but it's a little bit early. AJ says, you'll never lose my sub. So many ways I could take that. Sub sandwich? I don't know. All right. More questions coming in. I'll have to go at about past, but if you keep bombarding me, I'll just keep chatting nonsense. Daniel Granger, will Labour be any better than the Tories on censorship and civilities? That is a very complicated question. So I prefer Labour being in power than the Tories because when it comes to people's material circumstances, they are much likely to be better for a large number of people, even though they've done a massive amount to limit people's expectations of what they'll do. But Labour, they've kind of signed on to the Cass report, which is very anti-trans, so we're unlikely to see that atmosphere changing and the censorship and issues around that. They're not as anti-immigrant, and they have a more reformist view of the prison service, so that will help a bit in some ways. There is a large chunk of the Labour Party that wants to follow the Nordic model when it comes to adult work and sex work, so that's worrisome as well. There's a lot of sex-negative feminists in Labour. For the time being, I think they have too much practical stuff to do to get too far into the weeds on ideological stuff. So it remains to be seen, but they could be as bad, but in a different way, or at least with a different rationale. It remains to be seen. They can be a bit nanny state sometimes. Everyone posts one silly question to chat now. Jack says, what are some TTRPG settings that are expressly communist? Shit, I can't remember its name. It's got a spider person monster thing in an Ushanka on the front. It was an indie darling back in the day. Not many are really explicitly communist. I do have one I have notes on, which I may publish at some point, called Red Planet, which is an alternate timeline where Trotsky takes over instead of Stalin, and that is the point of divergence at which the communists take over the whole world, and then it's sort of set in the future, and you're members of a sort of secret police unit that is part of the idea of permanent revolution. So it's their job to stop corruption creeping in and to crack down on dangerous rebels and things like that. So I thought it would be an interesting thought exercise. Everyone accuses all kinds of games of being communist. So what if you did an actual communist game? I am not a communist. I'm an anarchist. I'm Batman in Red Sun. Zero Theory says, I never heard of the Kalergi plan conspiracy theory until you mentioned it. I don't think it reaches here in the US. Do you think it's a more Eurocentric conspiracy theory? Yeah, but no, but yeah, but no, but yeah. It's kind of tied in to the whole replacement theory thing and the white genocide theory. It's just and there goes any monetization. So it's a kind of subset of that, where they blame someone in particular. So yeah. Trapdoor Spider says, I've not seen Hawk the Slayer. Is it worth it? Hawk the Slayer is rubbish, as they say on Spaced. I like it. It is cheesy as fuck. but the elf is cool, and the one-armed guy with the auto crossbow is cool. It's a lot of fun. AJ Pickett says Google's Nordic model. Okay, so it's where you criminalize the punter, basically, and we kind of already have that here in the UK. But sex workers themselves are massively against it. I used to be friends with a sex work campaigner who was really, really upset about the whole thing. Unfortunately, she died. She was a great campaigner, and she's heavily missed. But Miles Jackman, the obscenity lawyer, he's a good guy on that kind of stuff. Worth a follow on social media if you're at all interested in sexual freedom and liberty. Oops, I clicked the wrong button. Death and Dam says Labour have already set about soundly shafting people with long-term illnesses. So all I've seen about that so far is an announcement that sounds bad. And as someone with a long-term illness, three long-term illnesses, yeah, that worries me because, us Crips have been very concerned about what the Tories were doing, and we're kind of relying on Labour being not that. So yeah, that's worrying. Them playing into this idea that, just because you've got terrible long-term illnesses doesn't mean you can't be forced to go to work. Yeah, it's a bit red Tory, but still better than it would have been. Which weapon is better, the glaive from Kroll or the mind sword from Hawk the Slayer? Practically speaking, probably the mind sword, but I always wanted the glaive, which isn't a glaive at all. The glaive is a spear, and that's a spinny thing with blades on it. But the glaive was cooler. The mind sword was probably more practical. Don't know. Glaive with flame fist. You only get one. And remember, those were separate powers. It was their wedding vows that made them shoot fire. Best 2000 AD character. Nemesis the Warlock. Then Dread. Then Rogue Trooper. Then Strontium Dog. Then Diaron Quinch. I could go on. So I like Dread Rune Knight, but he is a fascist bully boy, which is kind of the whole point of the character. They softened him a bit in later years, and now he's more like a grizzled, angry old man than anything else, and I like that too. But for me, Nemesis the Warlock is way up there. I forgot Slain. Slain would be somewhere in there as well, near the top. Though I don't like many of the more recent stories. I think they've lost the core idea of what Slain is, or Schlawain, or however you're meant to pronounce it. Bisley was okay, but Massimo Bellardinelli, God rest him, did a short run on Slain back in the day, and his warp spasms were the best warp spasms. Which best ABC warrior? Or, I mean, so those crossed over. Nemesis the Warlock and ABC warriors crossed over. Of the ABC warriors, I mean, obviously, I like Deadlock best. So, or are you saying that's the best one? Yeah, so Deadlock kind of merged with Nemesis at some point. I think that was Bisley's run on that, come to that. If you're an anarchist, why wear the hammer and sickle? To trigger people, basically. And while I generally hate propaganda, I find Soviet realist art to be fascinating. But yeah, I wear that to trigger people. It's the same reason I have Baphomet as a ring. And I have worn like Illuminati rings and things in the past as well. It flushes out the weirdos. And then you know not to take them seriously anymore. if their first comment is, he's a member of the Illuminati, look at his ring. Yeah. Joe Pineapples was a good character as well. Yeah. What's in Joe's chest locker? Human hearts. Have you ever seen or recalled The Archer, Fugitive from the Empire? Can't say I have. I just want a fire main. Who doesn't want a horse that can run so fast it outruns the sun? Yeah, that'd be pretty good. Wasn't Liam Neeson in Krull? I think he was. My 2000 AD knowledge comes from the White Dwarfs in the 80s. Yeah, some of those Games Workshop 2000 AD games are really good. The Rogue Trooper board game was all right. I've got Block Mania somewhere, which I thought was a lot of fun. Yeah, Sam Slade, Robo Hunter's good too. Yeah. SLAYED. Mal's back off to truck driving. See you soon. Chin chin. Daniel asks, is my MP still Tory? Yes. Unfortunately, he is. Kit Malthouse. He of the Malthouse Compromise. I live in one of the safest Tory seats in the country. The old Transport Secretary, George Young, used to be based out here. He wasn't awful as Tories go. He was a big advocate for rural internet. So Robbie Coltrane, Liam Neeson, and The Magician was not Dudley Moore, the other one. Fuck, no, brain switched off. Favorite and or most played board game? Played a lot of Arkham Horror, and I like Descent a lot as well. Split second with Rutger Hauer and Kim Cattrall, yes or no? Yes, but have your expectations properly aligned. Bigger guns, we need bigger fucking guns. Yeah, Ergo the Magnificent. All right, it's past. I got a few little bits to do before I make dinner, so I'll bid you adieu. I gave people a chance to come and confront me and talk to me or whatever, I suppose. At least a couple of you took me up on it. Like I said, I was going to repeat this at a better time for people in the States, but Mrs. Grimm says I have to leave it all alone, so I will from now on. Ciao all.
Real Grim. What are we gonna do?
Grim, that's how it looks.
I'll take Grim right now.
I am the Grim Reaper.
Bit grim.
The bosses are good.
And make it grim.
A grim tale indeed.
It's a little grim.
Meaningless and grim.
It's the Grim.
It's Grim.
Pretty grim, huh?
Things look grim